In a quiet suburban home, a mother's love and devotion for her daughter collide with a betrayal so dark it shatters the foundation of everything she once held dear. What happens when the person you trusted most becomes your greatest threat? This is the chilling story of a mother who went to unimaginable lengths to protect her child from the unthinkable. Stay with me as we unravel the real truth. Welcome to Fatal Affairs, a channel solely focused on bringing daily told and untold crime cases on love, betrayal, and revenge. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your unwavering support, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future updates. We would really appreciate that. In a quiet Texas suburb, the Sinclair family was the picture of stability. Marcus Sinclair, 44, a dedicated and respected police officer, had spent nearly 2 decades serving his community. Known for his integrity and commitment to justice, Marcus was viewed by neighbors, friends, and colleagues as a rock, someone whose dedication to protecting the public made him a pillar of the community. His wife, Catherine Sinclair, 40, was a devoted homemaker. She skillfully managed their home and the demands of her husband's high-pressure job, all while giving their only child, Lila, the love and attention she needed. Lila, a 13-year-old with a developmental disorder, had always been the center of Catherine's world. Diagnosed with intellectual developmental disorder, Lila's emotional and cognitive development were far behind her peers. She lived in a world of routine and structure, things that Catherine made sure were firmly in place to help Lila navigate life. Despite her challenges, Lila's vibrant imagination set her apart. Her drawings and stories were filled with innocent joy, offering a window into her unique and often misunderstood perspective on the world. The Sinclairs were admired by everyone who knew them. They were seen as the ideal family, Marcus, a steadfast protector, and Catherine, a loving mother who kept everything in balance. The love and unity they shared seemed to radiate outward, making them the envy of their neighbors. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect family, something was beginning to stir. For months, Catherine had noticed subtle changes in Marcus. At first, they seemed insignificant, little quirks or habits that could easily be brushed off. Marcus had always been a man of few words, someone whose quiet presence had never bothered her. But recently, there was an edge to his silence, something that felt unsettling. He became increasingly distant, both physically and emotionally. His absences from home grew longer and more frequent, often without explanation. When he was home, he seemed distracted, his thoughts elsewhere. Catherine initially attributed these changes to the pressures of Marcus's job. Police work was demanding, and she knew the toll it could take on a person. But as the weeks passed, Catherine's unease deepened. Her once steady and reliable husband was becoming a stranger, and no matter how hard she tried to convince herself it was just stress, something didn't feel right. She had always been the glue that held the family together, but now she could feel the cracks starting to show. Little did Catherine know, the changes she was noticing were merely a reflection of a much darker truth, one that would shake their family to its core. Marcus, the man she had loved and trusted for so long, was harboring a secret so horrifying that it would unravel their entire world. The more time passed, the more unsettling Marcus's behavior became. His presence around Lila, once warm and protective, began to feel strangely uncomfortable to Catherine. He started spending more time at home, which at first seemed like a welcome break from his high-pressure job, but it quickly became clear that something was wrong. Marcus's visits to Lila's room increased, and when he lingered near her door, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her daughter a little too closely. His glances, once casual and fatherly, now seemed filled with a strange intensity. He would knock on Lila's door, often entering without reason, and Catherine noticed that his voice had become unnervingly soft when speaking to her. His interactions with Lila felt too intimate, almost as if he was trying to hide something. The small, subtle behaviors slowly began to form a disturbing picture in Catherine's mind, one that she couldn't ignore any longer. One night, as Catherine was heading to bed, she passed Lila's room and overheard a conversation. The sound of Marcus's voice, low and insistent, sent a chill down her spine. "I told you not to talk about this, Lila," he said in a hushed tone. "It's our little secret, remember?" Catherine froze in the hallway, her heart suddenly racing in her chest. Lila's voice, innocent and confused, responded softly, "Okay, Daddy." Those words were so innocent, yet they felt like a punch to Catherine's gut. What secret could they possibly be hiding? And why was Marcus so desperate to keep it that way? Catherine's mind reeled. Could she be overreacting? Was she imagining things? She tried to shake the unease that gnawed at her insides, but deep down she knew there was something deeply wrong. She couldn't ignore the signs any longer, no matter how much she wished it wasn't true. The next day, while doing laundry, Catherine found something that made her heart drop. She was sorting through Marcus's uniforms when a small bottle of lavender lotion fell from one of the pockets. It was a brand she immediately recognized, a comforting scent that Lila had loved for years. It wasn't just any bottle. It was the same one Catherine had bought for Lila only a few weeks ago, the one she kept in her daughter's dresser. The implications hit Catherine like a tidal wave. Why would Marcus have taken Lila's lotion? Why was it in his pocket? Her hands trembled as she held the small bottle in her grip. Catherine stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what she had just found. Could it be a mistake? Could she have misunderstood? But deep down, she knew the answer. The secret was no longer something she could ignore. That night, Catherine lay awake in bed, her mind spinning with possibilities. She couldn't sleep, not with the weight of the growing terror sitting heavily on her chest. Marcus's behavior, the secret conversations, the lotion, it was all pointing toward something too horrifying to fathom. But she had to know the truth. She couldn't let it go. She promised herself that she would uncover the truth, no matter the cost, no matter how terrifying it might be. The night that Catherine had been dreading finally arrived. She woke to find the other side of the bed empty. At first, she thought little of it. Marcus often had restless nights, especially given the stress of his job as a police officer. But as the minutes ticked by and he didn't return, a creeping unease settled in her chest. Something felt off, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening right under her roof. Unable to ignore the gnawing feeling any longer, Catherine got up quietly, slipping her robe over her shoulders. She moved through the quiet house, her footsteps soundless against the hardwood floor. The soft moonlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows along the hallway. Everything seemed still, too still, as if the house itself was holding its breath. But as she approached Lila's room, faint sounds drifted down the hall. Soft, indistinct murmurs. Her heart skipped a beat. At first, she thought it might have been the wind, or perhaps Lila's restless shifting in her sleep. But as she listened more closely, the soft sounds became clearer. She could hear Marcus's voice, low, comforting, but far too intimate. Catherine froze in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. The soft murmurs continued, and Catherine's instincts screamed at her. This wasn't right. She took a step toward the door, the floorboards creaking loudly underfoot. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to stop, to turn around, but she couldn't. She had to know what was happening in her own home. She needed to understand. As she reached the door, she hesitated, her hand hovering over the knob. She swallowed hard, her mind racing with fear and disbelief. She couldn't bring herself to open the door fully. Instead, she pushed it open just enough to catch a glimpse inside. What she saw shattered her entire world. Marcus was in Lila's bed, lying beside their 13-year-old daughter, his hand resting too intimately on her arm. Lila, blissfully unaware of the gravity of the situation, looked confused and vulnerable, her wide, innocent eyes staring up at her mother in uncomprehending fear. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as the world around her seemed to collapse. Her heart hammered in her chest, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The room around her blurred, her entire being focused only on the horrific scene before her. Marcus, the man she had loved, trusted, and built a family with, was in bed with their daughter, her baby. The man she had called her partner was now her greatest betrayer. Catherine stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, her mind reeling, unable to comprehend the nightmare unfolding in front of her. When she finally found her voice, it came out in a scream, raw and filled with disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" Her voice cracked with fury and shock, the weight of the moment crashing down on her like a wave. Marcus jumped, his eyes wide with panic. He scrambled to cover up, quickly pulling away from Lila. He stammered, struggling to find an explanation that could undo what Catherine had just seen. "Catherine, please," he began, his voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." But Catherine didn't listen. She stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, and immediately moved to shield Lila, who instinctively curled into her mother's arms. Catherine's maternal instincts surged to the forefront, overriding her shock and fear. She pressed Lila against her chest protectively, glaring at Marcus as if she had never seen him before. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice rising with each word. "How could you do this? How could you betray our daughter like this?" Marcus, his face a mix of panic and shame, stammered more excuses, his words growing increasingly hollow. "Catherine, listen to me. You don't understand. It's been stressful. Stress?" Catherine spat, cutting him off. "You think stress justifies this? You think there's anything that justifies what I just saw?" Her anger was a fire now, burning hot and uncontrollable. Marcus's face faltered, realizing that there was no excuse for what he had done. He had crossed a line that Catherine could never overlook. His next words, though, made everything worse. "You need to calm down," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You don't want to blow this out of proportion. Think about what this means for all of us." Catherine's eyes flashed with fury. "You destroyed everything, Marcus. You destroyed this family. And now you think you can tell me to calm down?" Her hands shook with rage, her grip tightening around Lila as she looked at him. "What kind of monster are you?" Lila, still clinging to her mother, began to sob quietly. The innocent girl had no idea what was happening, only knowing that her mother was upset and that something had gone terribly wrong. Catherine held her daughter tighter, her resolve hardening. "I'm not staying silent," Catherine declared, her voice cold, filled with an icy determination that surprised even her. "You will never come near her again. I swear it, Marcus." Marcus took a step forward, his eyes flashing with the same desperation that had marked his behavior over the past months. "Catherine, you need to think about what you're doing," he warned, his voice tinged with anger. "If you try anything, you'll regret it." But Catherine didn't flinch. Her mind was made up. She would do whatever it took to protect her daughter, even if it meant confronting the man she had once loved with everything she had. Catherine's mind was a storm of rage and fear. The anger that had been simmering for days, weeks, maybe even longer, finally erupted into something uncontrollable. The moment she had witnessed in Lila's room was something Catherine could never unsee, but what terrified her more was the realization that this man, the man she had trusted, loved, and built a family with, was now her greatest threat. The decision was clear now. Marcus had to be stopped. Catherine's eyes locked on him, her heart pounding in her chest. His desperate excuses, his threats, they were nothing but empty words. Her maternal instincts screamed at her to protect Lila at all costs, and there was no turning back from that. Late one night, the weight of everything that had happened came crashing down. As Catherine sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her untouched dinner plate, her mind spun with thoughts of betrayal and the overwhelming need to protect her daughter. Marcus had been gone for a while, and the house was eerily quiet. The soft creaks of the floorboards, the distant hum of the refrigerator, everything felt like a prelude to something much darker. Then she heard it, the faintest sound of footsteps in the hallway, just outside Lila's room, the soft click of the door. Marcus's presence felt like a shadow creeping up behind her, ready to strike. Catherine's heart raced, her pulse quickening. She knew what this was. He was going back to Lila's room again. With each passing second, her anger grew. This wasn't just the anger of a betrayed wife. This was a mother who had seen enough, who had been pushed to the edge. She couldn't just sit back and let him continue. Catherine stood up without thinking, her body moving on instinct. She walked silently down the hall, her hand tightening around the cold metal of the gun hidden in the drawer. The weight of it was heavy in her grip, but it felt like the only thing in the world that mattered. It was the only way she could protect Lila, and if that meant facing Marcus head-on, then so be it. As she approached Lila's room, she saw him standing outside the door, his hand resting on the doorknob. A chill ran down her spine as the sight confirmed what she already knew. He was about to cross a line, and this time Catherine wasn't going to let him. "Marcus," she called softly, her voice eerily calm. He turned, startled to see her standing there with the gun in her hand. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but there was a glint of fear in his eyes now. "Catherine, please, put the gun down," he said, his voice shaking. "Let's talk about this." Catherine's laugh was hollow, the sound like the echo of everything she had lost. "Talk? After everything you've done? You think there's anything left to say?" Her voice was sharp, her gaze unwavering as she aimed the gun at him. She could feel the cold steel in her hand, and with every passing second, it became easier to hold steady. Marcus took a cautious step toward her, his voice shifting to something more dangerous. "You don't want to do this. Think about what you're doing, Catherine. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." Catherine's grip on the gun tightened, her resolve hardening with every word he said. "I know exactly what I'm doing, Marcus. You destroyed our family. You destroyed her." Her eyes were cold, unflinching. "And now, I'm going to make sure you never touch her again." Marcus lunged forward in a desperate attempt to overpower her, but Catherine was faster. She fired the gun once, the sound of the shot deafening as it echoed down the hallway. The bullet struck Marcus in the shoulder, sending him stumbling backward into the hallway wall with a painful grunt. But Catherine didn't stop. She wasn't done. Her rage had reached a boiling point, and nothing was going to stop her now. The second shot rang out, and the next, and the next. Bang, bang, bang. Each shot was a release of pain, of anger, of everything she had held back for so long. With each bullet, her grip on reality loosened, her mind consumed by the need to protect Lila, to put an end to the nightmare she had been living. Marcus collapsed to the floor, his body jerking with each shot. The blood pooled beneath him, staining the hardwood floor a deep crimson. Catherine stood over him, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling as she tried to process what she had just done. But it didn't matter. In that moment, all that mattered was that Lila was safe. The house, once filled with warmth and love, was now silent, except for the sound of Catherine's ragged breathing. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her like a physical force. She walked to Lila's room, her mind still spinning. Lila was sitting on her bed, her wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. The innocent girl couldn't understand what had just happened, but she could feel the tension, the change in the air. Catherine walked in slowly, her face an unreadable mask of emotion. She knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into her arms, holding her tight. "It's over, baby," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He can't hurt you anymore." But as she looked into Lila's frightened eyes, a new wave of despair hit her. What kind of life would Lila have now? What kind of judgment and cruelty would she face, knowing what had happened? Catherine's heart twisted painfully as she held her daughter close, trying to reassure her. But the truth was, Catherine wasn't sure what to do next. She wasn't sure what life would look like for them now. The only thing she was sure of was that she had done what she had to do to protect Lila, and for that, she would pay the price. The minutes that followed were like a blur for Catherine. She stood there in Lila's room, holding her daughter close, the weight of the gun still heavy in her trembling hands. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, and the cold silence of the house was suffocating. Outside, the world seemed to go on as usual, blissfully unaware of the storm that had just torn through the Sinclair family. Inside, though, everything had changed, forever. Catherine didn't know what to do next. Her mind was numb, her body moving on autopilot as she tried to process what she had done. The adrenaline had started to wear off, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of exhaustion and disbelief. But even through the shock, one thing was clear: she had protected Lila. That was all that mattered now. Catherine turned toward the hallway, her gaze falling on Marcus's motionless body. He was no longer the man she had married, no longer the man she had trusted to protect her and their family. The thought of him, of what he had done, pushed her to the breaking point. She had taken a life, but in that moment, it felt like the only choice she had left. She walked to the living room, her hands still shaking. Her eyes were blurry with tears, but she had no more words to say. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She had already crossed a line from which there was no return. Then, the sound of sirens reached her ears. They were distant at first, but they grew louder, and soon the flashing blue and red lights illuminated the windows. Catherine knew what was coming, but she didn't resist. There was nothing left to say. The police would arrive soon, and everything she had tried to keep hidden, everything she had tried to protect, would be exposed. A knock at the door echoed through the house, followed by the sound of officers entering. Catherine remained still, her body frozen in place. She couldn't move. She couldn't hide from what she had done. When the officers found her, they didn't hesitate. They carefully approached her, their hands resting on their holsters, scanning the room for any threats. Catherine didn't look at them. She kept her eyes focused on the ground, her mind still reeling. It was only when one of the officers spoke that she finally looked up. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The officer asked gently. Catherine's voice was eerily calm as she replied, "I did it. I killed him." The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment the officers stood in stunned silence. They had expected something. They just hadn't been prepared for this. "I killed them both," Catherine added, her voice quiet but unwavering. "Marcus and Lila." The officers exchanged glances, their eyes shifting between the woman who had just confessed to the unthinkable and the scene of the crime behind her. In the hallway, Marcus's body lay sprawled, the blood pooling beneath him, while in Lila's room, the girl who had once filled the house with laughter and creativity was now gone. The weight of the tragedy that had unfolded in these walls was almost too much to bear. Catherine was arrested without resistance. She didn't fight it. She didn't make excuses. She knew what she had done. But inside, a storm raged. Lila was gone. Marcus was gone. Her family, the life she had built, had been torn apart beyond repair, and all she had left was the memory of a mother who did what she thought was best to protect her daughter. As the police led Catherine away, she couldn't bring herself to look back at the house. It was no longer the home she had fought so hard to build. It was a tomb now, a monument to the devastating cost of secrets, betrayal, and rage. Catherine knew that no matter what happened next, her life would never be the same. If you found this story interesting, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more daily chilling true crime stories on love, betrayal, and revenge. See you on the next one.